Hello, Caroline.
Bonjour. Hello, Christophe.
So, why are we sitting here?
We're having a conversation.
Yeah.
Like many others we had, and we want to share them
Right.
with others.
So, welcome viewers. This is the first and introductional episode of our podcast, which Caroline and I would like to share with you. And it is called the Dandelion
Reflections.
Reflections. Right, I almost said it wrong. Because we had different ideas about how we will call it, and you came up with this idea of dandelions. Can you let our viewers know what your idea and your thoughts were behind that?
Absolutely. Many of you might have noticed that dandelions tend to grow in impossible conditions, such as in sidewalk cracks, and it's often used as a symbol of resilience. And in my work, I have the opportunity to meet people who are accessing their resilience, and that dandelion represents them, their journey. But also recently I heard about another meaning, more symbolic, that I really liked about dandelions. And if you look at it, it contains the sun, the moon, and the stars at different stages.
Never thought of it that way.
So it's so luminous, and I thought it was a very positive flower, and it's often mischaracterized as a weed, but we see it differently. Yeah. So we wanted to use that as the title and the theme for our dialogues. So that will bring reflections and hopefully inspire the audience.
You mentioned mischaracterization. That alone would be a whole episode, right?
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned your work. What is it you do in your professional life?
I'm a psychiatrist, and I work mostly with survivors of trauma. And I am also a storyteller and a story listener. I use narrative approaches in my work, and that's also a great healing tool.
Right. And where do you work?
I work at UC Davis in California, in the Department of Psychiatry, and so I have an educator role as well, in addition to a clinical role.
So you meet quite a lot of people and individuals, right?
Yes. Yes, I have heard many stories. I have met many people in my life, and it's a very close and intimate connection when you get to know people in their most vulnerable times, right? Seeing their wounds and helping them heal themselves. It's an incredible privilege.
I'm sure it is, yeah. What is it in you that made you take this path?
Yes, it's probably the wounded healer paradigm.
Well, what is that, just in short, so people know what we're talking about?
Yes, I will explain for sure. It's often we go through something difficult. Most people will go through loss and trauma and stress in their lifetime, and for some of us, the way to heal that or triumph over that is to go in a profession or a field where we can help others.
Right.
Who have gone through similar situations. And that's probably what led me to medicine in the first place. And then psychiatry, I wanted to understand human beings, and I wanted to also maybe heal myself, heal people I cared about that I could not quite understand. And I hoped at the time that studying and examining the dynamics would help me understand and have maybe more compassion and access healing, and here I am. So yeah, and I would love to hear about you because you also have a story to tell.
Yeah.
But in short, that's what my path is, and I really like the connections. So for me that was important to do a job where I could meet people and see them grow and thrive. That's also incredibly inspiring.
Isn't that true? Yeah. And just because I remember it right now, where are we here? We're in Sweden.
Yes.
Caroline, she will attend a conference in Oslo, in Norway, the capital of Norway, tomorrow. I'm sorry. So while I am living in Sweden, not far away from Oslo, and so you made it possible to stop by for a few days, and we have met online before in a very dedicated group, and a lovely group. Shout out to all of you. And so now we sit here and record our first episode of our hopefully helpful podcast. Yeah, and why do I sit here next to you? And this is something that many of us have encountered before, the imposter syndrome. I see it as a huge privilege to sit next to Caroline here, and but anyway, what we do share among many other things is that we have gone through a time where we saw how am I going to survive this? Why is this happening to me? Now I'm reflecting from my perspective, and I could never imagine that this would be the outcome of what I then perceived as one of the worst times in my life, and where I didn't see the light. But then now, being able to have endured this and solved these problems in our lives with the help of others that showed us the way, and here again another shout out to Uncle Bill, which we both know. A wonderful person, and also coach who founded this group where we met, Caroline and I. And suddenly, whatever you endured, whenever you felt you're a victim of everything, suddenly, when you step out and find the power, it can take a long time, that's okay, but suddenly when you look back at what you have experience and find a way, whatever, an individual way to use your experience to help others, that's the point when you're not a victim anymore, when you become the creator of whatever is possible in your future. And that's something that brought us together, and where we both saw these huge possibilities. What can we do to help others? Right, and we see, I think we both agree on that, we see a huge potential. So many people out there that struggle in life, that have struggled, but that can't really get off the ground after their hardships. And what the intention is with this blog is just to, with this vlog and blog and these episodes is to give you listeners and viewers inspiration, and in the future we also will create a space for you to ask questions that we will take up. And before I talk all the time, so what did I forget?
You did great, and I have a bunch of tabs opening up as you speak, because it's there's so many doors you're saying that opens, and such as the imposter syndrome, because I think it will be an important topic. I'm sure a lot of people will relate to that, especially in medicine. I can tell you that it's a very prevalent experience. And also, the goal for this is really to help break the sense of aloneness. Like you said, we want to inspire the viewers. We want the audience to know that they're not alone in experiencing whatever they're going through, and to know that, yes, it is possible to step out of the victim role. Mm-hmm. So you're right, we are the creators. We can use transformation of our experiences that are basically raw material for our growth. And we will hopefully demonstrate that in our conversations and with other guests we'll have. So, yeah, I love everything you said, and I'm so impressed at how the synergy came so naturally for us, right? We were having dialogues already and ideas. We're bouncing them off each other, and then, yes, like yesterday you had this other idea of like having a question and answers type of section, and we want to maintain that dialogue alive, and we want to make that relevant for everyone. So
exactly.
yeah. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about the imposter syndrome, or should we keep that for another time?
Yes, and it's one of the steps I took after my my darkest times is to take a coaching course, and now I work as an empathy coach, and when you're new in the field, or even when you're a seasoned coach, they still have this feeling, oh, I'm not good enough. How is it that I can talk to this person, which I perceive so much higher than I am, so much more knowledgeable, so much more wise, or whatever we make up. And again, not again, but here it is. Our brain just makes that up. It's not, well, it is our reality in that moment, but that's just something that our brain makes up. And why is that? And you, as a psychiatrist and very knowledgeable in talking to people, is there any explanation why we do that?
That's a great question. I mean, I've grappled with that issue myself, having those narratives that are not helping. You know, we realize they're not helping us, to keep comparing ourselves and I'm less than, or I'm never going to amount to anything, or it just beats us down, it just takes our energy away, and in fact it's not reflective of reality, because we all have talents, gifts inside of us. And I think what we did that led us there, to that kind of framework, was really mistaking accumulation of knowledge for true wisdom that we all have in us.
Yeah.
So I think, and like Uncle Bill would say, it's like this is what our brain does, right? Creating those narratives, those thoughts, but we just have to pause and sit down and say, hey, this is just a thought, right? Like he keeps telling us, and we are now really seeing it and living it. And like, yeah, thoughts are a fabrication of our minds. Often it happens when we're stressed or preoccupied, and it's probably a survival mechanism, right? When we were hunter-gatherers, we had to be alert to any sense of threat in our environment, and so now we don't really have that many threats, actual threats to our survival, but they're more abstract, I would say, threats to our ego. So when we're not relaxed, we tend to produce these thoughts, and as a defense mechanism, and as maybe to prevent us from taking risks. So again, our brain is trying to protect us. Oh, I don't want your ego to get bruised. But ego, again, is another illusion. It's another fabrication.
Yeah, well.
So we need to really start to inhabit more our right side of the brain. It's kind of a framework, right brain, left brain, and we'll talk about that more. But the right side of the brain is conceptualized as the center of intuition, creativity, wisdom, and it's more flexible, it's more receptive. And the left side is important too, but if it takes over, then it becomes overreactive, it becomes too rigid, and having those narratives. So we need to rebalance the two, not give too much power to the left side that really creates those narratives that we tend to believe, but that are not true.
Right. So the little that I know about it is our brain, the design of our brain is about 40 to 50,000 years old, and it hasn't really developed a lot from that time. And 40, 50,000 years ago, we ran found in forests and savannas, and there were constant threats we had to be aware of. That those, what were the tigers called with those long teeth?
Oh, I don't know.
Sword teeth? I don't know. Well, all kinds of threats at that time, not only in wildlife, but also in different tribes, and we were forced to be in groups in order to survive. We couldn't be an individual somewhere out there in the cave surviving. That wasn't the case. It just didn't work. So we needed this brain function to read groups, to read other individuals, to read situations, and to see potential dangers there. And fast forward to today, that's what our brain still does, right? And not only that, well, there are no tigers there anymore in the daily life that threaten us, but there are workplace situations, there are traffic situations. You're sitting in a car in a traffic jam and you're becoming aggressive somehow, or just turn on the news. You're constantly bombarded with all kind of perceived threats, which are only perceived. They are thoughts. They are not real dangers anymore. And that's what's happening today, isn't it?
Yes. And it takes for me coming to a beautiful, idyllic place like here, rural Sweden, Nasbo, I'm pronouncing it incorrectly, but to realize, yes, how pervasive those stimuli are, and how we need space, silence, solitude, and what's the other S? I call it my 4S formula: space, silence, solitude, and stillness.
Oh, right.
Okay, so this is what I'm kind of cultivating here, and thank you for being so welcoming and allowing me to experience this. And it really helps reshape my brain, you know, through meditation. That's a form of meditation, right? By reducing some brain structures, the size, their size, like the amygdala, to make them less reactive and sensitive to those perceived threats, like you said. And also, as we meditate, we also increase the connections between the two brain hemispheres. So the corpus callosum becomes thicker in long-term meditators.
So the corpus callosum is something that's in the beginning just a path between the both brain hemispheres, but the more you train it, the more it becomes to a highway.
Oh, very well said. Yeah, that's absolutely the right metaphor for that, because you increase the access basically because you have more fibers. So you rebalance the activity between right brain and left brain. So it becomes more adaptive.
Right.
Yeah, and it increases brain flexibility. So, yeah.
So I'm sure many of our viewers would love to hear, is there a quick fix for this chaos that we may see around us or inside us, or both?
It's a question I hear a lot in my patients. Actually, some of them will say, I want a happy pill. I'm saying, okay, I hear you. There are no quick fixes, right? No Band-Aid approaches. I mean, they just work short-term, like Band-Aids. We need to go deeper. We need to do the work. And mindfulness is one of the tools, but it's a practice, just like anything else. So mindfulness helps us also become more self-aware, self-compassionate, self-accepting, and then we can extend that to others. But really, mindful living is one of the core principles that I share with my patients, and I also practice what I preach.
That's very good. Okay, mindfulness. Let me take a step back. When we are stressed, when we are in fight-flight mode, what is happening in the brain?
Yes. What happens is, like, we have many chemicals released through the body. The fight-flight modes are a natural response that we have when there's a perceived stress. Okay, so that's our autonomous nervous system that reacts and it really puts us in a state of fight or flight. Literally, when there was a tiger or there's a bear, whatever, we're supposed to be prepared, right? So we have the blood flow to our muscles, our pupils dilate, so that we can receive as many visual stimuli that we would need to protect ourselves. There's a cortisol, that's a stress hormone that increases in our system. This is great on the short term. It helps us survive. It can save our lives. But when we're stressed, let's say we receive an email from our supervisor or boss that's stressful, or we feel a little bit bruised and critiqued and take it the wrong way, and then we can also have those fight-flight responses. But that's not good because it's not helping us. We were not going to die from someone not liking us, right, or disapproving us.
Mostly, at least.
Mostly, right. So we need to tone that down a little bit. But yeah, there are brain structures involved, like the amygdala is an almond-shaped structure in the brain on both sides. That is kind of the alarm system in the brain, and that can get easily activated if there are triggers. So if someone experiences a trauma and they have a situation that reminds them of the trauma, it's as if it's happening again because the amygdala is stimulated, and then the amygdala connects with other brain structures, and then you have this cascade of responses. And also the problem with the fight-flight is like we cannot think as clearly because the cortisol, which is a stress hormone I was talking about, is toxic for the frontal lobes, and we need those frontal lobes to think, to respond appropriately, to plan. So this is the part of the brain that has executive functions. So, but we don't have that when we're in a high stress situation. It's basically shut down. So people who are chronically stressed might notice they have impaired cognitive functioning. They can't remember things that well. They can't plan.
Oh, that sounds very...
Sounds familiar? To me, for sure. Yeah. So that's in a nutshell what happens. And then we have also the other F's, because you mentioned fight-flight. There's also the freeze and faint. And there are other ones. Some would say the fawn response, or but the four main F's are also all trauma responses. So when we can no longer either fight or flight, then what's left as a response is a freeze or playing dead or faint, which is an extreme freeze response. So people dissociate, meaning take leave of their bodies. They feel detached from their bodies. They might be feeling that they're floating above, but that's the ultimate escape sometimes. They can't flee an aggressor. They can't fight. They just have to play dead or, imagine themselves being somewhere else. And it happens especially in children because often they're too little to fight back. And that's the only way they can survive. So we see that quite a bit in children. And then it gets reactivated as adults. So they don't know why, but suddenly someone raises their voice and they don't remember the situation. They were just completely dissociated. So this is what I see in my clinical practice. And we try to have people go back in their bodies to heal, because there was a split between mind and body. When we dissociate, it's like the trauma just splits us. But if we do body-based interventions, mind-body interventions, also meditation, grounding techniques, it brings us back in our bodies. And then it can all reshape the brain in a way that's no longer, I would say, affected by triggers. We bring it back to a more normal baseline.
Right. So we're talking about trauma here a lot, and trauma is something. There's no scale, right? Well, maybe there is, but the scale is basically very individual. For someone, it can be a trauma when their luxury car is delivered with the wrong color of stitches on the leather seats. That's a trauma. And for others, it's a trauma when a loved one dies, or when their dog dies, or when they're having personal horrible experiences. So there's, whenever we talk about trauma, there is never any judgmental idea with us. Trauma is just a trauma for whatever you or we experience, right?
You're absolutely right. Often patients will say, oh my gosh, my situation was not so bad when I hear other stories. I mean, I shouldn't complain. No, like you said, it's the meaning of the experience that matters, right? How it affects you personally. So yeah, we don't compare. We don't have an hierarchy of trauma. I mean, it depends on the person's context, and trauma is trauma. Yes, we look at the reaction and how it affects the person.
Right. And I've had an experience by someone tell me, "Oh, whatever you're experiencing right now, that's not the big thing. There, this and this and this, and these are people who really suffer." Yeah, that might or might not be true, but it didn't help in my situation, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, you're right. I call that invalidation trauma, which is another trauma, right? Someone invalidating you. It's like, oh my gosh, I feel misunderstood. It disconnects us from others, so it's a unpleasant experience. Yeah. But no, we shouldn't compare trauma.
Right, and it's the one who experiences their individual situation that is the expert for themselves and for their situation.
Yes.
And so how's the normal approach of our health systems nowadays to handle people that have experienced trauma?
It's a very good question. I practice medicine and psychiatry in the United States, and it might differ from country to country. But the way it's approached, unfortunately, it's actually sometimes not talked about. So when I started doing psychiatry, I didn't know I would become a trauma psychiatrist. I had not anticipated that because it was not even talked about that much when I was doing my residency program in Montreal. And I had an excellent program, by the way, but I think it was a really universal approach to not talk about that. It was kind of relegated in a social history somewhere in the intake or when we were assessing people. And now I put that in the psychiatric history. The first thing is trauma and adverse childhood experiences. This is the thing I want to talk about because it's very chronological. I want to know what was the foundation in that person's life. Are they predisposed to have a trauma-related condition because of adversity in childhood? So I started paying attention to that when I was working in Minnesota. I was doing outpatient psychiatry, and I was hearing people telling me about their diagnosis, like a man, he said, I have schizophrenia, and I thought, he doesn't have a thought disorder. Why does he say he has schizophrenia? He was a dad, loving father, married, and but he seemed in distress, and he said, well, I have this little bird on my shoulder when I, then someone said I had hallucinations, therefore schizophrenia. And I'm like, this is not schizophrenia, right? Like I said, his thought process was normal, was organized. Having perceptual disturbances, by the way, is not a feature of schizophrenia necessarily. You need more than that to be diagnosed with such a severe psychotic condition. So I asked more questions. So I started just asking a lot of questions. I said, I'm going to put that diagnosis on the side because it just doesn't fit. And then I heard about his story a little bit more. He opened up about his childhood, and he had sexual trauma as a child. And he said, when I was abused, there was a little window, bird on the window. And I'm like, oh my gosh, well, was that, first of all, a real bird, or did he imagine it? It doesn't matter. It seems like it helped him go through that experience.
Right.
And now it got reactivated, maybe under stress. So we have to put that into context. I was like, that's it. He has PTSD. And I started reading more about that. I ordered books because I didn't learn that much about it. We heard about PTSD in the context of war-related trauma.
Yes.
But not so much in terms of kids going through stuff in their childhood, like physical abuse, sexual abuse, neglect, etc. So I just heard more and more because I became interested in finding the reason for their presentation. And these reactions or symptoms, by the way, are normal. They are due to abnormal situations. So I started reframing things, and I became interested in that, and then I moved to California, and there was even more and more. It just kept coming at me, and I was asking questions. People were disclosing that to me, and I really thought, okay, we need to change that. We need to give lectures. And so I'm sorry, I kind of forgot your question. I took a tangent here, but I'm very passionate about the subject.
Yeah,
but
go on.
You said, did you ask me what
the normal approach is by the health systems?
Yes. Okay. So I am kind of swimming in that health system that completely ignores that, right? It's also taboo Because who wants to say, oh, this happened to me? Because often people or the victims internalize what happened to them. It's my fault. It's because I'm bad. Especially
Yes.
children.
Oh yeah.
Because they're fragile, they're vulnerable, their self-concepts developing. So if someone is, inappropriate to them or attacks them, makes them feel unsafe, they feel like they've done something wrong. So they don't want to talk about it. And also for their healthcare professionals, it might be triggering because of their own trauma, right?
Right.
But I decided to break the silence, to be a voice for my patients, and there were other colleagues like me who were noticing the same thing. So we started creating some synergies, and now it's talked about more. But it's a process. It's a shift of culture, in the medical field. And also, people think that, oh gosh, it takes too much time. We don't want to open that can of worms, right?
Oh.
Right, exactly. It's all about cost benefit because everything's so monetized in a healthcare system, unfortunately. But once you take the time, the thing is, the healing will happen eventually faster,
Yes.
right? It's just worth the investment of time and presence to hear a person's story and develop a treatment plan that's, appropriate and to the symptoms and really help the person. Because for a while it was just we treat the symptoms. We just, again, band-aid approach. We treat the depression, the alcoholism, the whatever, insomnia, without knowing what drives this.
And no one takes their time to actually, like you do, ask questions. Where is that in the system? It isn't there. Not even. I don't see that in Sweden either.
Right. Yeah, it seems like it's a very common approach, unfortunately, to avoid and to just have a surface approach, which I don't like. I feel like all the symptoms don't happen in the vacuum. There's something that happened to a person for that to happen.
So now, what I love at being an empathy coach, I try to put empathy into the other side. I try to understand now the health system actors that are in a position where what we perceive they don't help. But why is that so? So spontaneously, I think, okay, they're in that system. They have a certain amount of resources, time, money, and personal and personnel, and now they have this certain amount of patients they have to help every week or every month, and are they victims of what?
It's a great question. I so love how you are also trying to understand the other's perspective, because this is the only way we're going to be able to bridge the discrepancy or different philosophies or agendas we're talking about yesterday. I really think that people have been conditioned towards materialism and accumulation of assets and status and power, and all of those structures thrives on people being sick.
Wow, that's a big one.
Yeah.
So what comes to my mind? Who's the beneficiary of this? Who's making money of people being sick? Okay, that's another episode.
Yes.
But okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, and well, let's if we go to back. We're all humans, right? Even the people in the health system that we meet are only humans. It's not the system that is sick, but let me think. Is that true what I'm saying? A system is made out of many different individuals, right? In this case, or cogs or whatever you put there, and each and every one has a decision to make, and but I think we can only fix this by taking a bigger perspective and talking with each other, not seeing each other as adversaries, but we are all parts of this system, right?
Yes, you're right. You've said it really well. It's the broader perspective that is lacking.
Yes.
People do their own little things, not thinking that it has an impact or a ripple effect.
Right.
But we're all interconnected. I mean, as empaths, it's probably easier for us to realize that, but we need to zoom out of this system that is becoming sicker and sicker and not sustainable.
And we're just kicking down the can, kicking the can down the road, right?
Yeah.
Until it blows up.
Yes, and also there's a competition that fuels that, I think, and especially where I work, right? Institutions compete with each other. Like, who's the best in cancer care? Who's the best in technology? And treating drug addictions, or people compete. It's so you lose sight of what really matters. Is we want to improve outcomes, right? So we have to stop being so egotistical or self-centered and looking at ourselves, but looking at, okay, where do we want to go? What's our vision? What do we want for the patients? We need to become de-selfed or selfless, in a way.
De-selfed, yeah. How easy is that? We would love to cling to ourself, or that what we think is ourself, right?
Yeah.
And we defend it against perceived attacks and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And that's the same for every human, I think, right?
Yes, we become attached to the way we view ourselves, the way others view ourselves.
So becoming aware of what's happening in our own thoughts and spreading empathy and thinking empathetically about what could be the idea behind some other person's acting, what could be their agenda behind this, what's my agenda, just asking the question, nothing more, no judgmental issues there, just asking the question, then listening. What is my agenda? What is their agenda? That can already open a lot of doors, new doors, right?
Yes, you're very good at that, the inquiry, and I think this is essential. You said it, non-judgmentally, asking, understanding the other person's position. That's the only way we can come up with a solution that is viable for everyone, and everyone has to be attentive to each other. And yes.
And let me just say that too, or add that. Before we can understand others, we should not forget to try to understand ourselves and be empathetic to ourselves first. That's nothing bad. That's nothing negatively egoistically. Am I saying this right now, grammatically? So I think we tend to forget that too in stressful moments. Again, as you said in the beginning, when we're in stress, our frontal cortex is shut down, and the longer the stress is perceived, it even has physical effects, right? It physically decreases in size. Is that true?
So in fact, there's another brain structure, that's the hippocampus, which is the in our brain, it's an area for memory, right? And when children have trauma, the cortisol will actually be toxic for that area and prevent proper development. So that can affect even memory and emotional regulation and relationships and connections. So that has a direct effect. And later in life, cortisol can affect other tissues in the body. So we see actually there's higher cellular aging in people who are under chronic stress. You can see it in their face, like their skin, they might be more wrinkled, they look used by life. They age prematurely. So, but meditation can reverse that, actually. So meditation affects the genes, a part of the gene. So, but chronic stress is not good for our brains, for our bodies.
So, okay, so let's try to take the end part of today's introductional episode. So first of all, what do you think people can expect from following us in the future that might help them?
Yes. Well, things that we talked about today, we will potentially deepen that. We will have guests. We already talked about a few guests, and that's kind of the beauty of you being so connected, and I also having a sense of belonging in Canada, where I was born, and also in the U.S., where I developed a community with Uncle Bill and the group.
Yes.
A wonderful group we're part of. So we will have guests from that group, because there's an incredible, I would say, wealth of wisdom among these people. So we will have conversations with people. It's really about getting to know each other a little bit more, and having people sharing their own understanding of situations, how they overcame adversity, and how they approach life to heal. So yeah, we really want to have a diverse group as well.
Yes.
And what I mean by diversity is really not just the skin color or religion, but it's also the way people think, the way people make life choices, the way people consume. That's what diversity means to me.
Right.
Yeah.
And again, all these different categories, our brain tends to make up, to put other people into those categories to make it easier for us to survive and to save energy, or let our brain save energy. That's just something that we make up. That's my deep conviction. Conviction?
Belief, yeah. Conviction, yeah.
Is that we are all one, right? We are all connected. If I don't feel well, you don't feel well. If you don't feel well, I don't feel well. And what we see in the world today, this division all the time. We can't overcome this by being a part of this division. We can overcome this by becoming the light and having this being brave. Oh, I love this. There's this poem by Amanda Gorman. She talks about being brave enough to become the light, and it's so beautiful. And that's what we want to be here, right? By having these conversations and having them publicly available, we would like to be brave enough to be the light and to encourage others to become the light, right, for themselves.
So true, and I wish I had that permission, or given myself that permission earlier in my life, to just shine my light, because we all have that inside of us. And what does it take away from others to shine our light? Nothing. Right? So we want to convince you, if you're not yet, that it's important to really express your gifts to this world. This is why we're here, and really connecting and believing in each other and seeing the good in others is really important, and not trying to compete and not comparing, and not being afraid of being who we are. This is really what it is about, and we need more light in this world right now, and more than ever, I think. We need that shift happening. Yeah.
That's a wonderful ending, I think, for this episode. What do you think?
Yes, I'm fine with it. Thank you. I'm looking forward to next conversation.
I have this feeling it can't be better right now if I add anything.
Yeah, of course it can.
So, yeah, thank you for listening to us for these, I don't know, somewhere near 45 minutes maybe. Thank you. It was a delight for us to speak to you, and we'd love you to follow us and listen and watch future episodes. And maybe I should. Now I do want to add something. We don't have any idea of making this highly professional. We just want to be ourselves, right? We don't want to fulfill anyone else's expectations. we're not here. This is not a competition. We want to keep these episodes basic, down to earth,
Right.
real, and authentic. That's what we want to do. So if you're looking for super duper intros and outros and highly qualified video editing, sorry, that's not us. But we want to be of help for you and encourage you, as Caroline so wonderfully said just a moment ago. And again, if you have anything you want us to cover in these episodes, then feel free to comment, feel free to write to us. We will add our socials and email and websites and whatever you have, a bunch of blogs that you may want to follow. Yeah, we will add that in the comments or in the description.
And I want to say, yeah, like just to paraphrase what you said, we're coming here as human beings, as fellow
Yes.
human beings. So,
Exactly.
voila.
Voilà. Merci beaucoup. Thank you so much for bearing with us. And
Thank you.
have a great day. And see you again next time.
Sending you peace.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye. Au revoir.